am the director on this project. We have a very special guest in the audience tonight. The playwright has made a special trip here to see this show. So, to Jordan E. Cooper.
I'm the other co-founder and co-producing artistic director of Front Porch with my wonderful Ellie Dawn, and yes, it was my face, and wall, which was so beautiful. I want to welcome a special opportunity for this wonderful conversation between two fabulous folks in our community, and the writer of this play, Mr. Jordan Cooper. And the one and only Jacquinn Sinclair. So I believe I'm next stage right because they're far more interesting than I am.
I don't know if that's true. Hi, I'm Jacquinn Sinclair. I'm a freelance contributing arts writer for WBUR and theater critic. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. And also, I'm really excited about the work that Front Porch is doing with co-producing partners like SpeakEasy, bringing Black stories to the stage. So thank you for the work that you're doing. So Jordan, this is the second time I've seen the play, and I wanted to cry both times for a number of reasons, but also I laughed, I got angry. Can you talk to me and the audience about, you know, the emotional journey that you embarked upon when writing this play and performing as some speeches?
It was a process. I always tell people that, like, I'm the guy who likes to laugh at funerals. Like, I always like, why is she wearing a bra? She's going 6 feet under, like, Jesus will not take it. Okay. And so I always have to find some sort of way through, or some sort of thing to carry on while I walk through the darkness. And Ain't No Mo really represented that for me. I started writing it at a time when it felt like every day you woke up, somebody new was being killed by the police. And I remember being so frustrated and so angry, and then I had my own run-in with the police. I was at a 7-Eleven, and I was reaching up to get a slushie, and I was standing next to a police officer. And when I reached up to get the nozzle, he, like, touched his gun. And I, like, put my hands up, and he just kind of like, and then walked off. And I remember going back home being like, dang, I really could have died over this nasty-ass slushie. And so I wanted to write about, what if we just, like, all said, F it? Like, what if we just all got on a plane and said, no more injustice, we're not taking it anymore, we're not dealing with it anymore. And we just all decided to get up and go. And that's really where Ain't No Mo was birthed out of. And in the midst of this wonderful romanticized idea of, like, let's get up and go, came the realities of Black Americana. And came the realities of the complexities of Blackness and where do we really belong, right? Because I think whenever you have a dash before American, home is slippery for you, right? You don't really know what it is. And so all these questions just started coming to me while I was writing, in the midst of writing. So many things that what I set out to do while I was in the middle of the water, it told me it wanted to be something else. So I just laid back in the boat and let it take me. Yeah.
Yes. I like that line in the play where they talk about, you know, what are you searching for, right? And Africa is not ours. And while I was watching that play, I thought a lot about that. And, you know, do you find that you're searching for home in any way?
Yeah. Not necessarily. I feel like I was telling somebody this the other day. I was like, you know, why I had to rearrange my relationship with the word being a patriot or patriotic, because I recognized that the America that I grew up loving had nothing to do with the America that I saw on television. It had nothing to do with apple pie or, you know what I mean, the Dixon, whoever. It really was Patti LaBelle and Luther Vandross and Aretha Franklin and The Living Color and all that and the Jeffersons and Good Time. Like, that was Americana to me. Yeah. So to me, that was a home that I grew to love, that I appreciate. And I think as a kid, I used to be obsessed with the idea of, like, going back and going back. I was obsessed with roots. I would take my family to Blockbuster every Friday, and they'd be like, "What you getting? Roots!" They're like, "We watching Roots again!" And I was obsessed with it. And then the older I got, the more I realized that because I carry that history with me, I get to define home, where I am, in whatever soil I'm standing in. And that all comes with me. They're all inside of me. Like my engineer says, you carry everybody who ever said a kind thing to you, you know what I mean? I carry all of my ancestors with me. And I think I learned, especially because of this play, I learned to appreciate the blood in the soil.
Speaking of that, the characters Blue and Black. What was it like to write those particular characters? And I know it's probably difficult to choose favorites if you have any. Do you have any favorite characters in the play?
Oh, that's a hard one. I will say that Blue gets me every time. I have a softness in my heart to Blue. But writing both of them, writing Black specifically, Black was like a freedom exercise. Black was like, if I've been chained down for all these years and I finally get free and I get to proclaim myself and who am I? It was like that. Writing that monologue was just literally like, what is blackness? I asked myself, what is blackness and how would blackness proclaim themselves? And then it started with early 2000 cornrows black. And it just rolled. So that was a great exercise. And for Blue, writing Blue was, whereas Black is like this ball of energy, Blue is like this cold stillness, right? Because I've learned that through my callousness is my safety, and the reality that now I know how to be callous in this, I don't know how to be callous in that, and I think there's a bit of self-sabotage that happens with that character, of like I don't know what freedom is, and I don't know if I desire it, because I don't have what came with me when I was free. Yeah.
I have to ask about Miss Bag.
Yes.
I wanted Miss Bag on the plane, right? But I also, there's a part of me, right, that worried about trusting the government with such a ticket, right? Are they ever really getting there? Is it a setup, right? Like, is the plane going to crash? All those thunder and lightning going on? Tell me more about Miss Bag. How did Miss Bag come to be? And Peaches getting left behind, was that like always the way it ended?
It told me how it wanted to end. I didn't know she was going to get left behind. There are some things about being a writer that is the most frustrating, but also what I love the most, because nothing scares me more than a blank page. Because I don't feel in control, and I feel like I've never written anything before in my life. And it's because those characters are so often like trapped in the room with you, and they guide you through. You can set out and be like, all right, bitches, this is what we're going to do. We're going A to B to C to D. They're like, well, we want to go Z to F to H to A. And I'm like, God damn, you just got to go with it. And so with Peaches, all I knew was that it was Peaches, and I wanted there to be this character who was a larger-than-life drag queen, because I love the idea that the person who was in charge of carrying blackness onto the plane was somebody who could choose what they wanted to be, and who they wanted to be, and how they wanted to present, which I feel like is a freedom. I feel like blackness is inherently queer, and so I feel like that's kind of who the gate agent was, and so often forgotten, as we find, but I really saw the two of them together. It's like a two-person scene, Peaches and Miss Bag. Miss Bag really is the carrier of all things black and all things black history, and everything that's ever been created here on this land, right? Anything that blackness has ever fallen out of the imagination of blackness lands in Miss Bag. And so, with that being said, I knew that there was a lot of power in this character who, has been here since 1619. And the idea of picking up everything and going, right? What I found at the end of this play was I was really on a quest to get out. And then I realized that getting out was actually the easy thing to do. That it was easy. That's the only word we hear from Miss Bag in the whole play is easy, right? This idea that it's easy to say, no, it's yours, I'm gonna let you have it, let me go, right? And the harder thing to say is that actually this belongs to me. That blood in the soil is my soil, right? I was talking about black culture as being this thing that, like, when the first African was brought over here, there was no such thing as black American culture, right? But we made something out of nothing. And what we made must have been so beautiful because we took sticks and stones and mud and we built something called culture, right? And now all of a sudden everybody wants to come and visit this museum that we built, right? And so it's the reality that when you look at the Black American story, it is a story of magic. It's literally taking something out of nothing, probably more earlier than any other culture has had to. When you think about 1619, a lot of other cultures started hundreds of years before then. But when you think about a specific culture starting in 1619 and then carrying itself over, what happens when this country that we built as we know it to be in this day and age is now being told that we no longer belong and we no longer deserve to be here. We have to fight. And I think that's really what this play is getting at, especially after November 5th. November 5th, I was down for the count. But I found myself going back to this play strangely. Going back to be reminded of resistance, going back to be reminded of rebellion, because we are really entering into a time of distraction and deception. And I think it's not even about staying woke anymore. See, another colonized word. See, it's not even about staying woke anymore. It's about staying vigilant. You know, it's about even this TikTok PR stuff. How many young kids are gonna look at that and actually attribute that to Mango Mussolini? He saved TikTok. He saved TikTok. So you know what I mean? It's insane, and we're watching it happen in real time, which is why we have to stay vigilant.
Right.
You know, and this is a play that we get a chance to see what happens when we're so busy chasing the carrot in front of us of a free plane ticket, not even realizing that the whole plan the whole time is to take this. You know, and nobody was paying attention to that besides the queer person they left behind, and she can't fight by herself. You know.
Talk to me about your whole body of work as a whole. What would you say is the ethos or the big idea of what you hope your work accomplishes? Liberation. Liberation. That's the thing that I look at as being a chief cornerstone of all my work. Because in each iteration of everything that I've done, I've always been met with the resistance in the beginning of what is he doing? Why would he say that? You can't say that on stage, you can't say that on TV, you can't, you know what I mean? And I think that I was a kid who, I like to say the quiet part out loud when I was a little kid. Literally, I would start writing plays. I started writing plays, and my mom got tired of me cutting up her wig in my dad's work uniform. So she was like, all right, we're going to take you down to the church so you can put on your plays at church. So she asked my pastor if he could put on plays at church. He said, yeah. Well, this got a little tricky when I would start to put the church business in the play. So they would pull my mom aside and be like, you gotta tell them, because I'd be saying, you know, sister so-and-so don't wash her hands. And she would get mad, but I'm like, you shouldn't have said it last week. If you didn't say it last week, it wouldn't be in the play. And I feel like there's a part of me that's still saying the quiet part out loud in all of my work. In the thing that, you know, people get afraid of, specifically in a room with white people. It's like, we can't say that with white people here. It's like, compute, control, alt, delete. And I remember my granddad, I was in an August Wilson play, and he came to see it. And my granddad was he had the slickest mouth you ever want to be in the play. The slickest mouth you ever want to. Nigga this and nigga that, nigga, sit your ass down there. But he did not like that August Wilson play that I was in, because he did not like the fact that they said nigga in front of white people, and that white people were in the audience. And that just blew my mind, because this was a man who, when he was 14 years old, got hit in the head with a bowling ball by a white man in Texas for not moving fast enough. And yet, here he is in the theater for a play that's supposed to be for him,
still confined about what this person is doing. And it became my mission that day to always create spaces of liberation. And when I say spaces of liberation, that includes, I'm not going to care who's here, who's listening, because I know this is for me, right? I remember a first review that I got at Ain't No Mo, was a critic who loved it. But he said, you know, it was so good, but you know, so many colloquialisms went by so fast and I didn't really understand. And I was like, how many times have I walked into a Neil Simon play? David Mamet play. And so many colloquialisms went by so fast that I'm expected to get it. I'm expected to meet them at the same level that they're on. Right? And I think it is a complete disservice for me not to expect the exact same thing.
So, I saw in an interview that you've been writing plays since you were about 6 years old?
Yeah.
Okay, so from the living room to the church, to rec rooms, to Broadway, what have you learned about yourself in the world as we being creators?
I learned that I love people. I really love people. I love telling stories. The thing that I learned, the biggest thing was, and this is after Ain't No Mo was on Broadway, which we got, you know, all the Tony nominations and all that thing. That was cool. But I think I was fooled by the top of the mountain that I always looked at since I was a little kid. And I recognized this when I got to Hollywood. That when I was a kid, I used to think, oh, wow, look at what they're doing. You know what I mean? I could never do that. I can only hope to do that. And then you get there and you realize don't nobody know what they're doing. So you was fine with the tools that you had, too. It's just they had a little bit more money. And I think that when I got to Broadway, it was the same thing. I had the same illusion in my head of, oh, this is Broadway. So I used to stand outside in Times Square and hand out flyers outside of theaters. So I'm like, okay, I always thought once I get there, I ain't gonna have to do that, right? It's Broadway. Well, I got to Broadway and I realized I couldn't afford to just make sure the food was good. I couldn't afford to just make sure the play was good or that I was giving the best performance of my life. I had to do the work within the infrastructure that was not built. And that includes, you know, going out to the audience that Ain't No Mo is built for, right? Because so often they're like, black people don't go to Broadway, black people don't go to Broadway, or like the ticket prices are too expensive. I'm like, no, black people got money. We just don't want to spend money to go see that. You know what I mean? We just don't want to see that. So it's like, you have to let me know that my name is on the door. You have to let me know that there is something happening in this space that is for me. And I think that what I've learned throughout this entire journey is to continue to have my feet on the ground and continue to recognize that it's up to you to build the infrastructure that does not exist. You can't depend on anybody. I will no longer be a backseat driver. I will no longer be in the back of my own car. You know what I mean? It's like you really have to, because nobody's going to care like you care. So I think that that's something that I really recognize. And I think that's not even just for Broadway. That's for theater all over the nation. You know what I mean? It's like how do you let people know that, no, this what's happening here is also for you. You know, I was telling a story about Lloyd Richards. Lloyd Richards was directing A Raisin in the Sun, the original in like 1958, I believe. And he told this story one time about how, you know, the show's up, Sidney Poitier's in, you know what I mean? And he was walking to the theater, and there was a black woman who had a maid's bag, right? He said, the reason I know it was a maid's bag is because my mom was a maid, so I recognized that bag. And she went up to the box office, and she put down her $1.50 and said, I would like to get tickets for A Raisin in the Sun tonight. I said, sorry, man, the show is actually $2.50, right? And so she takes all her money out of her bag, she puts down $2.50, she gets her ticket. And he goes up to her, Lloyd Richards goes up to her, he's like, man, can I ask you a question? She's like, yeah. She's like, why would you pay $2.15 to see Sidney Poitier here live when you could just go to the movie theater and go see a movie with him in it for 75 cents? And she said, word's going around my neighborhood that there's something happening here that concerns me, and I have to see what it is. And I think that that's what I aim to do, is to continue to let the world know that there is something happening here that involves them.
So recently, you were in New York at the Apollo Theater.
Yes.
reunion with the cast,
Yes,
the original
yes.
cast. How was that?
Oh,
Talk
it was
about
amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I was able to get a lot of the original cast together, as well as Carrie Young, who just won a Tony not too long ago. And we did Ain't No Mo. We did stage reading at the Apollo, and it was for free, open to the public. Whole bunch of people showed up, hundreds of people showed up, and it was so powerful to do it on that day specifically. But also to just jump into that role again, jump into Peaches again. It felt like putting a glove back on. The audience was so there. It's also such a privilege to like be able to go back and do free events for the community. You know, I feel like so often you get caught up in the commercialization of theater and you forget like, oh no, that was the point. It was supposed to be like that's what I built it on. And so that was enriching, and then it felt like a huddle for all of us, a safe place for all of us to go who didn't want to watch the news and who didn't want to lay in bed and be depressed about the state of the world, and come and be reminded of like, no, you have the power. The power is in you. You know what I mean? Because it's so easy to get wallowed in like, oh, woe is us and woe is me and look at this and look at that. It's like, okay, what you gonna do about it? You know, what you gonna do about it? And what you gonna do about it within your own front yard, within the people you know, within your friends, within your family? What does it look like for you to do something? Right? And I think that was the beauty of that night, just community coming together and acting a fool over this play and saying, oh yeah, there is something out there. You know?
And speaking of power, might as well give some to the audience. See if you guys have any questions.
I have one.
Oh yeah.
So as the person who does this show and also the person who started it, what would you say is like the biggest difference between you speaking these words and then you hearing them from someone else?
I was just talking about that. It's so interesting. I'm saying this is the third time that Ain't No Mo's been done, and I wasn't like around or in the rehearsal room and it's weird. It's weird, but it's so beautiful to witness other people's interpretations of the words, because that to me is proof that it is a living thing, that it can continue to grow and morph and shift with the times and the bodies that hold them. You know, it's a privilege to be able to watch these amazing performances tonight, and your amazing work. It's I can't even describe it. It feels like it matters. It feels like it matters. Where, you know, for so long, this play and another play of mine that I just did, there are certain plays that I write that feel like they're going to stay on my computer because they feel so personal, or they feel like I don't know how anybody else is going to understand this or get this. And so it's always beautiful when it's like I get to like birth the thing and then entrust it in hands, you know, that know how to take care of it. Yeah, it's always a privilege. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could expand upon like the promotion process, because I saw the original on Broadway a couple of days before it closed. I was just in the city, and that's when it went from like not having a lot of people, then there was this huge push.
Yeah.
And I remember my cousin who lives in the city, she's always in the show, she's like, no one knew about it.
Yeah.
She's like, the community didn't know, and then it was at the last minute, everybody was being bused into every church, every school. So it was like kind of what you were saying, like what happened with the publicity at the time that that the people didn't know what was happening.
Yeah. So multiple things. There's a lot of factors. As far as the marketing factor, one of the biggest things was really that there's not necessarily an infrastructure on Broadway for reaching specific audiences, especially when you don't have people on your team early on, like at least a year and a half advance of knowing that you're getting a theater to like really get involved with the people who do have that infrastructure. But what happened really is that Broadway I always say it knows how to market to people who want to see Bette Midler and Hello Dolly. And not everybody wants to see Bette Midler. Specifically, a lot of people who get a lot of the inside jokes of this play, right? And I think that when I would try to push that button, it just wasn't there. The infrastructure wasn't there. And then when the infrastructure wasn't there, then you're trying to build new infrastructure on top of that. And then it's like, oh, the money isn't there. So it becomes like a whole thing because I'm like, I want billboards on Church Ave. I want subway billboards. I actually had a marketing person tell me that we don't do play advertisements for in subways. And I was like, I lived in New York for 10 years. I've seen, it's not just musical advertisements in subways. Yeah. So it's like it's an infrastructure that has to continue to be challenged because what I think it does is that I think they say they want to, bring everybody and bring it all, but then you get all in there and then some people turn red at all. I remember there was one night, it was one of our final performances, and we had a pre-show. It was like a club on Broadway. We had people shaking their ass. We had people shaking titties. You would have thought it was making it rain. And we had someone who was in charge of the theater who did not like the fact that people were dancing or before the show started. So they came back, they have to stop that. Make them stop. They have to stop that right now. And I kept it in the whole show. And then at the end, I took the bow and I got a microphone, and they shouldn't have given me a microphone. But I basically said, I told that young lady, I said, if you want to shake your ass in the theater, you shake your ass in the theater. That's what it's for. I was like, this is a space of liberation. So often I walk into a Broadway theater and I'm told to hush, or I get that look, or I make a noise and people turn around and look at me like I'm crazy. You know what I mean? When I paid the same amount of money. And I think that it was important to me to create a space that was the opposite of what I experienced when I walk into those spaces. I wanted people to hear back that ass up as soon as they came in. I wanted you to know this is for you. This is for you to have a good time. I always say, I love white people. I always say it's for so long I never got the invite. I just had to walk in the door. And I think with this play, I wanted to make sure I'm not going to send a specific invite, but the door is unlocked. If you want to come in and make yourself a plate and we can dance together, let's have a good time. But it was important to invite the people who did not know that the space existed. And I think a lot of the marketing on Broadway has a lot to do with that. And I think it's getting better. I think after making that noise, I think a lot of shows that were coming after, you start to see, you know what I mean? You start to see them try to do that work. Got a long way to go. But
marketing for the Wiz was much better.
Yeah. Got a long way to go, but I'm grateful for where we are. And I think that really it's just that the infrastructure doesn't realize how racist it is. Yeah. And then I would sit in the theater and they would be looking at me like I was crazy. They'd be like, how dare you say Broadway's racist or blah, blah. But they did not realize that Ain't No More was in the Belasco Theater. I don't know who knows the history about the Belasco Theater, but there was a third balcony up there that was completely full the night when Homegirl was shaking her ass. And I looked up at that balcony and I said, y'all say it don't exist, but you realize that this third balcony was for colored people. It was for you to come up the side of the Belasco Theater and go directly to your seat and just get your ass directly out the theater without having to interact and contaminate anybody below you, right? So you can't tell me it doesn't exist when I'm looking at a physical representation of it, Yeah.
Hi. Wonderful play, by the way. Very beautifully written. I had a question about the Black women representation in this play. I really loved how the Black women were written, and what was your kind of like drive to have these different variations of Black women and different types of representations of Black women? Because we've seen it all from the baby mamas, from wanting to change the way you sound, changing the way you look. So what was that process like? And also the line with Miss Bag and talking about the roots. What are those roots and how can they also connect with Black women in the show?
Yeah, great question. Whenever I sit down to write, 99% of the time the voice that comes out is a Black woman. And I think that that's because I was just raised around just the best human beings you'll ever want to meet, who are all black women. And I found myself, I was in college when I was writing this, and I found myself surrounded by colleagues, like female colleagues, who like the roles were not. It just was the same kind of the thing, and it was important for me to be able to show the versatility of black actresses. And I think that with this play in particular, well, it's like the acting Olympics is what we called it, because it was like you were exhausted by the end of the night. It was like, golly, you know. But I really wanted to show that versatility, that I can do this and I can do that, and blackness is this and I can do this, and blackness is that and I can do that. It was like an important part of the pie to me, especially because I feel like we are a matriarchal culture as well. And then also, as far as the roots with Miss Bag, I think it was the idea that, you know, we are in the soil. Like, our ancestors are in the soil. Their sacrifices, their blood, their sweat, their tears, their spit, all of it is in the soil. And therefore, all of it is linked to Miss Bag. So if we were to pull Miss Bag onto the plane, it would take every single person on that plane to come and try to uproot all of that. And even then, it might be impossible, you know. But the idea that this was a character who's like, no, I am here and I'm rooted here. You know, you can go take easy if you want to. But then what happens is the minute we leave it, it gets, you know, taken and monetized and becomes whatever for convenience. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Courtland Edie, and I actually have two questions. One of them being, what was the process from getting this script, like from your computer to Broadway? And then how do you not think your ideas or think you're writing to death?
That's a great question. So it was a long journey. It started out as a 10-minute play. That first scene was the first thing that I written, that church scene. And then I did it in a 5 this time, 10-minute play festival in New York. And I just knew there was more. So I kept writing and then these other voices were coming in and these characters were coming in. And I ended up doing a reading at Blackboard Plays. Really what this started out for me being, before I even knew how to get anything produced, I was more interested in reading. I was more interested in being able to get it in front of an audience to experience it for free. So that way I knew I wasn't crazy and I knew this kind of made some kind of sense, you know. Because before we had tried to send it to places, we sent it to like Lincoln Center Theater and they were like, this is not a play. Like, they were like, you know, it was the reactions of like, what is happening here? And then Blackboard Plays, then I was at school with Stevie Walker Webb, who was the director of the original Broadway production. He was also one of my closest friends. But he was in the MFA program, I was in the BFA program. And I'm doing these plays, these community readings, and he's doing the 2050 fellowship at New York Theater Workshop, and as a director. And he's like, brother, would you mind if I like did one of your plays like as my fellowship presentation? I was like, you want to do it? Ain't no more at New York Theater Workshop? I'm like, you sure they want to do it? Ain't no more? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so they did it. And then New York Theater Workshop was there, and some representatives from the public theater were there as well. And I invited some, you know, people around the city to come check it out. And it became a bidding war between New York Theater Workshop and the public theater. And I ended up going with the public theater. And then they did a workshop there when I was in college. It was like 2018 they did a workshop. And then Lee Daniels saw that workshop. Lee Daniels came and saw the workshop, and he was like, I want to take this to Broadway. How do we take this to Broadway? And so after that, the public actually did the world premiere production. And then Lee just kept bringing it up in the air, kept trying to get the money together and make it happen. And finally in 2022 it happened. Yeah. But overriding. So I love, because I can do the same, I can overwrite. What I have the tendency to do is like, I'll like be writing, but it's hard for me to move until I feel like I got the rest of that perfect. That scene has to feel perfect for me to move on. And the problem is it never feels perfect, so I just have to move on. But what was helpful for me was community, one. Not only the community readings that I would do in public, But also, I love to cook some gumbo and invite my friends over and just say, hey, I'm going to put a script up on a TV screen. Can you just read these characters? And sometimes I'll do that without even finishing the play. I'll tell people a date and a time to be there. I'm like, damn, I got to finish this play because people coming over. Sometimes I have to trick myself like that, you know. But it's always, for me, it's depending on community, because they will let you know if something doesn't make sense and you think it does, or vice versa. And that usually can help me know that, like, okay, it's time to take it out of my instrument and let people do the thing. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Yeah, with that.
First time seeing it. One question, you kind of touched this on a little bit on the play. How do you think the Caribbean diaspora fits into this? Right? Because I think as someone who's a first generation American, I felt always a little bit on the outside of some of these spaces. Right? I felt like I was code switching even amongst my own people. Yeah. So if you can speak to that, how do you fit in? When we have our own special section on the plane, like
Black kind of talks a little bit about that, about buying the dream before you know the price, right? Buying the idea of the American dream, which is like sold to all of the world, and then the reality that a lot of times you get over here and it's better than we were, but it still has a lot of nastiness in the air. And I think that specifically in this play, there is no differentiation between being first generation, second generation. It's more so like, because at the end of the day, you walking down the street, the Klan don't know where you from. The cops don't know where you from, right? And I think that it's so interesting because what you see in that family dynamic is there is a different level of pride, because it's like, I can point to where I come from, right? And then there's this aspect of like, I can't point to where I come from, right? And so I kind of put him in there to be that representation of, actually, I'm not searching for anything. I'm not in search of anything that I don't already know, right? But I think we're really all literally on the same plane, even when we have our own kind of intersectionality identities that would like us to believe otherwise. But when it's time to come together, we come together. Yeah.
Thank you for being here.